Okay, hello everybody. Thanks for joining for this exciting training. I'm personally excited for this because you guys won't have to hear me talking, some other folks who are sharing their expertise here. But I did want to just start with a little icebreaker here. Since we have so much to cover, I thought we could just go around, say our name, and say the month we were born in. So I'll start. My name is Mickey Davis. She, her are my pronouns, and I was born in February. I'll pass it to Adonai.
Hola, mi nombre es Adonai Cuevas. Mis pronombres son masculinos y yo nací en el mes de mayo.
Hi, my name is Adonai Cuevas. My pronouns are he, she, and I was born in May. And I'm passing it to Amanda.
Thanks, Adonai. Hi, everyone. Amanda Laban. My pronouns are she, her. And I was born in this lovely month of October, a week from today, or yesterday, actually. It's already Wednesday. And I will pass it to Esther.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Esther
Hi, good
Caldera.
afternoon. I'm Esther Caldera. My pronouns are feminine, she, her. Happy birthday, Amanda. And I was born in July. And I'm passing it to Holly.
My name is Hallie, and my pronouns are she, her, ella. And I was also born in July. I'll pass it to Lucy.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es
Good afternoon. My name is Lucy. My pronouns are she, her, and I was born in April, almost the 30th of April, that is the day of the children in Mexico. And I'm gonna pass it to Erica.
Hi, Erica, she, her. I just walked in, or like hypothetically walked in, and so I got month of birthday. Okay, December. And I will pass it. Whitney, have you gone?
I have not. Hola, mi nombre es Whitney. Uso pronombres.
Hi, my name is Whitney. I use she, her, and I was born in April. And I think I'm the last one.
Did you go, Lauren?
Lauren?
I think I'm the last one. Hi, my name is Lauren. I use she, her pronouns, and I was born in October.
Happy birthday. Thanks, everyone. So we will get started. We are recording this, so feel free to share this presentation with any subcontractors who can't make it today. And then, yeah, we'll be planning to share this with future contractors who we bring on board, in addition to a training we do with them in person. But I wanted to introduce, before we get started, the place where I'm keeping all of these recordings. So I'm going to share my screen here, and I sent this as an attachment. I sent this as an attachment in the last email I sent last week. So yeah, can folks see this little Google folder here? Okay, so we've got a few things in here, and we'll continue to add to it and, you know, try to keep it tidy. But in this folder, you've got your flyers and promotional materials. And this is where a lot of the marketing toolkit lives. Those resources for farmers that we talked on briefly last week, those live here in this resources for farmers folder. And then our presentations today are here in sort of the main folder. And this document has a list with links of the recordings of each of the trainings we've had, with a really brief overview of what we talked about, so that hopefully, months from now, when you want to refer back, you can hopefully find the right link. So just wanted to share that in case it's helpful. Any questions about this folder? Okay, great. Okay, I think we'll just go ahead and pass it over to Amanda so that we can get into our invoicing lesson from her. And then we'll hear from Whitney to discuss those best practices for outreach to retailers. So take it away, Amanda.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'll get us back to the first slide. Is everyone seeing that in slideshow format? Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. Mickey, right now I can only see your screen, so I'll use your head cues as good to go. Okay. This is the all exciting presentation on reimbursements and invoicing, which will be kind of content heavy and a little bit dry, but it outlines the process that we think makes your reimbursement requests a lot easier. We know that this can be kind of a bottleneck in CDA between the people that we award funds to and contract with, because there are a decent number of requirements, but I think once you have your head wrapped around them and understand them, it's very logical, and the process can be a lot smoother once you understand the context of everything. So let me just go ahead. I'll start with sort of giving you an overview of all the things that we're going to cover, and then I launch into checklists and more specifics.
Amanda,
So
mind if I jump in real quick?
Sure.
Just to reiterate that this is the process that contractors will go through for reimbursement, but also the same process that our applicants will need to go through when they are, when they've already expended their funds, and this will be the way they prove that they bought what they said they were going to buy.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for jumping in with that, Mickey. Yeah, and this, I think, the level of sort of hitting many of these elements of invoicing and reimbursement, like you all as contractors will probably be seeing the full scope and having to submit on the full scope, whereas many of our retailers and grant recipients, will probably have one big purchase and we'll have that receipt and they'll submit that. So, hopefully by you understanding this whole context, when we're working with the retailers, it will be so much more, it will be even that much easier because they won't be requesting mileage reimbursement and hours and supplies. It'll probably be one of those categories, not all of them. Okay. So actually, sorry about that. So we'll go through the checklist. We'll go through all types of supporting documentation that's required. I'll give you some examples and talk through, all the elements of the invoices, how to sort of do a checklist of the step-by-step process. So we go through 9 different steps of how not only you'll gather your materials, but then submit it to CDA. You'll find out what happens on our end, and then I'll open it up for questions. But if you have questions throughout this, please feel free to jump in, being mindful that some of them might be answered in the following slides. Okay, so as a nonprofit, when you're submitting your invoices, one of the things that you should be conscious of anytime that you are buying materials connected to your program and connected to this work is that you should be using your tax exempt certificate because the state will not reimburse for any taxes that are incurred as a nonprofit. And so if you haven't used your tax exempt certificate when you've purchased something, you do have to remove that tax when you submit for reimbursement. So for example, say you're buying 20 reams of paper and it's $59.99 as a subtotal, but it has the state close to 8% tax on it. We will only reimburse you for that $59.99, not for what the grand total is, which would probably be somewhere around $60-something or $70. So that's one of the big things to keep in mind. And just, you know, when you're submitting, you are, as a nonprofit, going to have to remove those taxes. On the other side, the businesses, when they are purchasing their equipment, as long as they don't hit the maximum of what they were awarded, they can be reimbursed for taxes. Again, as long as they're not a nonprofit business themselves. So most of the small food retailers will be for profit. Most of the farms will be, and so they can keep their taxes on the reimbursement request. Supporting documentation, you know, this includes your mileage logs, which you'll see an example of, any of your receipts. So always super important for anything that you're asking the state to reimburse, you have your receipt, even if it's something as small as $1.79 for some pens that you needed. You want to make sure that you have that receipt. Timesheets for any of your staff time. Again, I'll show an example of that in a little bit. And then for all of those things, you're going to have to show proof of payment. So if you as a staff member of your nonprofit have submitted for mileage reimbursement and got paid, and then your organization is submitting to the state to get that reimbursement, the check that you were provided for mileage for travel, that needs to be shown in the request. So again, there'll be an example later on, but that constitutes proof of payment that a check was written to you and that it was deposited. Other forms of proof of payment are within a checking account or the, you know, any sort of bank account that your organization has. Taking a screenshot that, you know, when you bought those reams of paper, that did clear the account. And so taking a screenshot of the date of the vendor that you bought it from, what the item is, and the total cost. We are always asking for you to check your calculations because when there are errors, we do have to send it back and have you update those. And that takes time because as soon as if you do make a mistake, you know, we review it, we send that back to you to correct, but then you go back into the QE of all these requests that we're receiving. So it behooves you to check, double and triple check before you submit it to us. We ask for a summary page of all the things that you're asking for reimbursement for. If you have more than 10 pages, so basically a summary saying, you know, I have receipts on pages 5 through 8. I have proof of payment on 9 through 13. Just sort of a snapshot of what is in the packet, because sometimes we've gotten packets that are close to 100 pages. So it's a lot of material to wade through. And we ask when you submit your reimbursement that all of this is assembled into one single document. So instead of sending 12 attachments, that constitute a packet, we actually want you to have it as one single document. Usually the easiest way to do that is with Adobe, and you have scanned your receipts, you have your invoice, and then you have your proof of payment, and you assemble those into a single PDF and send it on to us. Okay, everybody good? I know it's a lot of information, so we'll break it down next. The invoice itself. So how you write your invoice is really important from the government perspective. Our accounts payable team will not reimburse something if you say you're an independent contractor or something, and you are an independent business entity, but you have a DBA with a different name. You have to put down exactly how you file your taxes, how you name your business on your taxes. So if your business is Healthy Foods Incorporated, and that's how the IRS sees it, then that name, Healthy Foods Incorporated, needs to be on the invoice. The invoice number. So if this is the first one that you're sending, or if you work with accountants and you guys are on invoice number 3021, you just need to have that number on there, because we will track that, because most likely you will be having multiple invoices. And so we just need an easy identifier. The word invoice also needs to be on the invoice. So even if everything shows that it's an invoice, if it doesn't have the word invoice on it, accounts payable will send it back and ask us to have you redo that. We will have you put CDA as the billed to entity with attention to the Community Food Access Program. And then after that, everything is detailing the expenses and the items that you're looking for reimbursement. So you all submitted budget category budgets and had items detailed within categories. So you had your staff time as personnel, you had supplies and materials, you had travel. You want to make sure that your invoice has each of those categories. If on a given invoice you didn't do travel, you don't have to include it. You don't have to have a 0 on there. You can just not have it on there. But anything that you're claiming should be associated with one of those budget categories. Again, checking that you're removing the taxes. It will be clear on the receipt that you might have paid that $72, but the subtotal is that $59.99. So we'll go back and make sure that that's removed, and you can track that on your invoice as well. And then make sure that you've totaled everything up for a grand total of the reimbursement request. Okay, this is really text heavy, so I apologize, guys. I don't have any fun pictures right now. So logs, you're gonna just log everything. As I mentioned, any mileage reimbursement that you're requesting, you're gonna have a start location and then an ending location, how many miles one way that was, and then totaling the round trip. And then everything will be at the same rate. We're using currently 0.59 cents per mile. And again, you'll see that on our examples and the templates that we have. You want to make sure that you separate each individual employee who will be working on this project. So when we do, when you submit time logs for staff reimbursement, just make sure that don't jumble it all together. It's a lot easier for Mickey. She lists her hours, what days, what her rate is, what her total is, and then Adonai has a separate log with his number of hours, the date that he did them, his rate, and the total, and descriptions as they as they relate to CFA and the work that you're doing for this project are important. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but just, you know, outreach trip to small food retailer, meeting with staff, you know, for planning purposes, things along those lines. It can be a general, it doesn't have to be super detailed, but it should have some specificity so we know what you're doing. Again, retain all your printed receipts, and for any supplies and material purchases. It should be easy enough to scan these with your other supporting documentation, or, you know, we don't want the receipts to be just images that are attachments separate from the rest of these documents. So when you do have a receipt, if you can scan it to be included into the PDF packet, that's the way that we're looking for it. And sorry, let me just move my cursor a little bit. So the last point is just having one invoice for whatever time period you're submitting. So if you're submitting for 1 month, but you have, again, travel reimbursement, you have staff time, and you have materials, putting that all in the one invoice. You don't need 3 different invoices. You need one invoice with each item in its budget category. Proof of payment tends to be, I think, one of the stumbling blocks. And a lot of times we, you know, just get feedback that, you know, folks don't want to share too much information, you know, from their business bank accounts. And that's why screenshots and being able to capture selections is useful. Or if you know how to cross out information, you can do that as well. But I find, you know, just if you take a screenshot of what you are proving has cleared in your bank account, then that's the easiest way to go. Images of cleared checks should be pretty easy to obtain. And you can download those and you attach them as part of the invoice packet. And for the state, proof of payment is required. That's the guidance that we have, so we can't make exceptions at this time. Proof of payment is required. So even though it seems like, you know, a receipt for the materials that you purchased, again, like those reams of paper, you would think that would be enough for proof of payment, but there's always the question of, is this your receipt associated with your business purchasing this? And so we want to see that it cleared the bank account through your business, so that we know that it's an expense that you actually did incur. The compiling all this documentation in chronological order is really helpful, and doing it in the same order that you have your budget categories. So if you start off with staff time, follow that invoice with the proof, the logs of the staff time. And then if after staff time it's materials, then you follow the log of the staff time with receipts for those materials. And then you had travel, then you put your mileage log after that. And then following that, you have all the proof of payment for each of those categories. Okay. So here is an example, and Mickey, are there any questions, or does anybody want to jump in and ask anything before these visuals come up? Okay, so this is an example of one of the invoices. So I tried to do this as simply as possible so that you can see what is required. So the entity up on that top left, so if I file my taxes as Amanda B. Laban, then that's how I write it here. Just like I gave that example before with Healthy Foods Incorporated, that should be listed with the address that is also filed with your taxes. So whatever's listed on your W-9, it has to be that exact address. And then you put who you're billing it to. So Department of Agriculture, this is our address, and then attention, community food access. In the middle here, I have that this is invoice number 1. I have the date that I've created the invoice. I have my contract number, so you all will, have those contract numbers, and that will be the same every time. Because we're doing outreach and technical assistance, I listed that there because that's the type of service we're providing. And here I put an invoice period. And this spans, what is that, 4 months? So even 5 months, I think, because it's the beginning of May to the end of September. So this should be clear that if you have dates down here that are in April, then they shouldn't be included in this invoice period, right? So your invoice period should mark the beginning to the end date. And this is a relatively long one, a long invoice period. Monthly is great. If you're doing multiple months at a time, that's okay as well. Mickey, I don't think have we specified any in period of time in between? Okay, yeah. So but it's sometimes, I feel like as organizations, you like to, it's easier to put a whole bunch of things together and just submit once as opposed to submitting monthly. But I will say that the likelihood of error increases, and we tend to go back and forth a lot when people are doing 5-6 months at a time, because it's just harder to track. You end up having a lot more documentation, mistakes get made. So, more frequently can be helpful, even if it might seem like more work up front. I think in the end, it ends up being easier, but we will leave that up to you all for now. Okay, so here, as I mentioned, these are the dates. This is what I'm asking for reimbursement for. This is the category. So it's really helpful if you put a budget category column on your invoice, so that it's very clear that this is for your personnel time, this is the rate, this is the total hours, and then that's the subtotal. So the rate times the total hours. So I have 2 different staff totals here. So that's listed. Then I have some purchases that were made. This is the subtotal, the $19.99 and the $7.10. It does not include tax. And then I have my travel, and this doesn't, you don't have to put the addresses here, but it is helpful to say what you were doing and the number of miles. And so the subtotals over here, detail each one. It is best if you do it line by line. Like if you have your subtotal as 125.67, but don't put these the itemized pieces in front of it, then oftentimes mistakes get made. We can see where the error has occurred. So it's best if you're doing this line by line, so we can see how you got that subtotal. And then as you see, each of my subtotals are in gray, so that I have a grand total here. This is what I am submitting for reimbursement. Put your name, signature, and a date, so that is all clear. And then that's your invoice page, and that sort of covers everything that's gonna be shown as supporting documentation after this. Okay, so started with personnel. If I go back, actually don't know if I can go. Oh yeah, I can. So I started with Francesca here. That was my first line. So my first page is Francesca's timesheet, what she did, the date, the rate, and the hours. I know some of it seems repetitive, but you can just auto-populate a lot of this, and it's easy. Have your formulas in there, and you get your subtotal, and you are good to go. The next one is for Esmeralda. She was the second one. If we go back, she was the second one listed on here. So I have her timesheet second. She just did a couple hours. We have her total. Great, all is good. Next up, we had, so I didn't do it in the order on this one because I was doing the logs, but there's no logs for materials and supplies. So this is our general mileage log template. We can give you a copy of this. This is a filled out version of it. And, you know, it has where I started, where I ended, the times that I left, the number of miles, the rate, and the subtotal. So those are all my logs. And then with receipts, this goes back to what I had on the invoice summary or the invoice page. So there were two things that I was claiming. If we go back, I was claiming this lightning cable and some printing and copies that were made. So I have both of those receipts scanned, and they can be together because it is two and they can fit on one sheet. That's fine. You could, if you can fit four and they're legible, that's fine too. Oftentimes we get scanned receipts and you can't read the numbers. You can't read where, you know, where it was bought to be able to match up. So just make sure that they're clear when you scan them in. Sometimes you need to select a higher resolution, you know, when you're scanning it or when you're sending it over. So just be mindful of that. And then we get into our proof of payment. Yeah, so this is an example of, you know, one of my purchases. The grand total, as you see here, is $21.62. That's with the tax. The proof of payment will match that. It's obviously not going to match the subtotal because you had to pay in full. So it has the date, it has the amount, it has the vendor, it has the location, and that's as simple, you know, as it can be. You know, in this instance, you know, I use the header of my statement, of my bank statement, and then just took a screenshot of the individual item. And this, you know, even though it's not one single screenshot and it's layered images, it's tracking with what the receipt says. So 7/3, if I go back, yep, made the purchase on 7/2, so it would clear on my account the next day. So that tracks. If something, you know, was purchased in May and I'm showing a proof of payment that's October, like there's going to be questions around that. That doesn't seem to jive, but that proof of payment should match that it cleared within a reasonable time period. We understand sometimes maybe it was 4 or 5 days because it was a weekend and a holiday. So hopefully that makes sense. In this case too, I think this is a good example because the business sometimes doesn't fully line up. Sometimes they do funny things, like the Ace Hardware still has they were True Value beforehand. So they, you know, their receipts say Ace Hardware, but the bank shows it as True Value. You know, I think as like with most things, as long as it's reasonable, like that's going to be fine. The numbers, the amount add up. It was in the same location. You know, we can track that. You know, if it's something absolutely different, we're going to have questions, even if it's the right amount. If it says it's like King Soopers and you, I don't know, we're buying landscaping or irrigation equipment, you know, we might ask about that. That may not be the best example, but just, yeah, something that is reasonable and explainable. So then this is the proof of payment connected to the receipt for the printing copies. So again, if we go back, I have this was a handwritten receipt that the library gave me. I made a lot of copies. They were 10 cents each. So I have the initial receipt. Doesn't really probably prove complete payment. So we go back here and it's like, okay, wrote the check and it cleared. As you can see from that backside, when you submit the proof of the checks, definitely make sure the backside is there so that we can see that it entered into the account or was withdrawn from the account. This is just a secondary example of the proof. So my check matches this on my statement that a check cleared for $7.10. In most cases, you may not need both, as long as you can show one or the other. If you can show both, great, that's super helpful. Okay, so how's everyone doing? Good so far. Mickey, how are we on time? Good. 12:37.
Yeah, we're gonna be on time.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm just going to go through like this step-by-step process that hopefully just helps you wrap your head around it so it doesn't seem so overwhelming. The first thing that you should do is just gather all your documentation. I think if you start with that, you start with your staff timesheets, your receipts, and your mileage logs, and you get those into one pile, that will be really helpful for you. And then you organize everything into its budget categories so that you can create your invoice matching everything that you have. Sometimes we get invoices that just don't have, like they may claim that a supply was bought, but then they don't have the receipt to back that up. And so then we have to go back and ask for that receipt to match. And so I think if you gather all the documentation first, it makes it clear on what you are asking for reimbursement for. And if you don't have documentation, then maybe you shouldn't ask for it that go around until you can find that documentation, until, things have cleared the bank, for example. Your third step when you're creating that invoice, just go back to the example that we provide in this slideshow and that we'll have in that folder. Start with the name as it's listed on your W-9, you're billing to the right place, make sure you have an invoice number, all those things. Then your next step would be to get your subtotals for each of the categories and total that up for your grand total. And then you should be pretty good to go on the invoice. The supporting documentation, since you already have it in a pile, now you're going to just organize it so that it matches what your invoice looks like. Again, in this slideshow, it's a little bit out of order, but I actually have a packet that shows exactly what this invoice packet would look like. And it's only 5 pages. It clearly identifies that I have my invoice that has all the charges and expenses being asked for. And then I have my logs and my receipts and my supporting documentation. And I can fit that all in just a few pages. So it helps tremendously. Like, you will get reimbursed more quickly if you have things in order and everything follows this logical step-by-step proof of, or just if it follows the same order that the invoice is in. So your invoice, your supporting documentation, your proof of payment. If your expenses cover more than 1 month, just follow chronologically within each category. I think that might be relatively self-explanatory, but just try to keep things in chronological order. It makes it easier to track. Step 7, you want to just double check that all your documentation matches what you're requesting. Again, this shouldn't be a problem if you've organized it from the beginning, but double checking is what we ask for before you submit. So do that one more time, and then you can scan it all as that one document, or you can upload it and save it as that one single PDF. We use PDF all the time. If you have some other format that works and you can send it as one single document, that is totally fine with us. And in this case, you're going to send all of that straight to Adonai. He's going to receive them all and be the one communicating with you if he finds things missing or has questions about anything. Then Mickey will take a look at it, and then it goes to me for a final check before accounts payable receives it and makes the payment, which sounds like a lot of steps, but again, if it's done right, we can all almost do it, like we can do it within a day or two. But that is pending, how many are in front of you. So if you submit it and there's 20 in front of you, it may take longer, but it behooves everybody throughout the process that things are accurate, because everything will go faster. So yeah, we can get through them quickly and get you your payment as soon as possible. These last couple of slides just have to do with, so you understand, what's happening on our end. I've mentioned it already, but this just might be some good context, so you understand what's happening on the back end. We review them, as I mentioned, in the order that they were received. The review times do vary based on the number of requests received in a given time. So I will say that the biggest backlog that we've had since being here is around the end of the fiscal year. And so this kind of goes to, if you submit things on a more regular basis, instead of doing 6 months at once and submitting it in June, I'm going to tell you, if you do that, if you submit January through June, you submit it in June, it is going to take a long time, because we're looking at all 6 months. June, where there's a backlog because it's the end of the fiscal year. Things get really crazy then. So just know that, I do recommend you submitting early and often. It will just make everything easier for you getting your money more quickly. The requests, as I mentioned, they're reviewed at the program level. So Mickey and Ad and I are reviewing them, and then I'm reviewing them at the division level, and then accounts payable accepts them and pays them. And we technically have 45 days from receiving the complete and accurate invoice packet to process and submit for payment. Again, we try to do that more quickly. When it takes longer than that, it's usually because we've started the time over, because when it is inaccurate, that time clock starts over. Yeah, so if there are corrections that need to be made, calculations that were inaccurate, we send it back, and we don't start that time clock until you resubmit it and it's accurate. I think I covered all of this, and just so you know, we are more than happy to talk you through it, chat on the phone as needed at any point, to explain things or help give suggestions about how to assemble the packet, or how to get a screenshot, or examples. So just let us know at any point. Start with Ad and I, and Mickey, and if they need some further assistance, or just any other, like if it need a division, if it's a division related question or just a larger question, you can feel free to reach out to me to answer that. Yeah, okay, I think that is it. That covers everything. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for bearing with, it's kind of a dry topic, but I hope that this is helpful. And I think when you refer back to the materials, it will be really helpful. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. And Mickey, I think I know we have a little bit of time, so we can take questions, but I'll also just share that assembled packet so you can see what that looks like.
You're got an echo, just want you to know.
It just started, Amanda, like in the middle of the last slide, you got a little echoey.
Mickey, maybe unmake me co-host.
All right, I did that. Try to talk.
I don't, it's still bad. Oh, shoot.
It's funny, last time it was Mickey, this time it's you.
I know. We don't know what the issues are. We can't swap rooms. So maybe Mickey, I'll just hand it over to you, and I'll just pull up the documentation.
Sounds good, Amanda. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that You know, again, this is relevant for contractors and awardees, but unlike contractors, awardees will get their payment upfront. They'll need to invoice the department, outlining what they plan to purchase. And this will be after their application is reviewed and after we've together worked on a scope of work and the beneficiary agreement is signed. They'll need to go through that formal step of sending an invoice to the department. They don't have to have already purchased it, but, you know, requesting, this is exactly what I plan to buy, make and model, you know, invoice CDA, then we'll advance the full amount. And then after those purchases are made, or after those, operating expenses have been incurred, then they will need to go through this detailed stepwise process that Amanda outlined. So you all have access to that presentation, something feel free to reference again and again. But are there any questions about that presentation right now? Okay. Any other thoughts, Amanda?
Is it still echoing?
It's not.
No, I switched to the theme as the system for my microphone. So,
Okay.
So I might have you make me co-host again so I can just share that packet real fast.
That sounds good.
Hopefully don't run into issues. Okay, great. Okay, gonna share this. So just quickly, I mean, again, this is just a reiteration of everything I showed. But here's page 1 of the invoice. So this is essentially what you will submit to Ad and I. It is the invoice, and then it's the timesheets that constitute the supporting documentation. Then it's receipt number 1, proof of payment of that receipt. And we have receipt number 2, proof of payment of that receipt, and travel reimbursement. And, you know, that constitutes the bulk of it. The one thing that I couldn't show you on here was the proof of payment to the staff, because these are made up folks. But what we do ask for are pay stubs. So, you know, just showing that Francesca was paid through your organization. The pay stub will likely be different than the number of hours listed here, but just showing that they were paid for the month. It can just be, you know, it can be simply the pay stub. And that doing that for each of the staff people, it constitutes the proof of payment. So if you're paying someone, if they're not on payroll and they're a contractor and you're just writing checks, have a copy of that deposited check as the proof of payment if there's not a pay stub that you can generate. But yeah, essentially this is it. It doesn't have to be, you know, it can seem like a lot, but it doesn't have to be overly complicated. And again, I think once you do it a handful of times, you understand the logic, you understand the process, and yeah, it should be hopefully not too tedious of a process. That's it. That's all I got.
Thanks, Amanda. Any questions? Okay. Well, that concludes our invoicing presentation. Don't feel like that's the only time we need to talk about that. ask us anything, anytime, and we'll figure it out. But yeah, now let's switch gears to talk about best practices for retailer outreach. So really grateful that Whitney Leeds is here from Growing Home. Whitney's organization has worked really hard to, with a lot of different organizations, to compile some best practices for what to do when you're working with retailers. So, you know, we are recording this, so please share with any subcontractors who aren't here, and then you'll have access to that best practices guide. Whitney's going to share the English version of the guide, but I'm putting the Spanish version here in the chat. Okay, Whitney, are you able to share your screen and ready to go? Awesome.
I think so. Can everybody see that screen? Great. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Whitney Leeds. I use she, her pronouns. As Nikki said, I'm with Growing Home. If you're familiar with the Denver metro area, we're around 72nd and Federal. We're actually celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. So we're really excited about that and all the work that we've accomplished in the last 25 years. And so I want to preface this presentation by saying that we compiled this guide because when we heard that the Community Food Access Program passed the legislature in 2022, our community members active in our food justice campaign decided that they really wanted to prioritize working with our existing corner stores. But we didn't have any experience with that. So the first thing that we did was we started reaching out actually to a lot of the people that are on this call today. Erica was one of those first folks that we had a conversation with. But we started speaking with different people that had done work with corner stores in their area under very similar circumstances to the circumstances that we have in our neighborhood, which is that we no longer have any supermarkets. And a lot of the folks in our neighborhood really struggle to meet their food needs because they don't have that accessibility. So for us, corner stores play a really integral role in our local food system, and not wanting to kind of go into that blind and accidentally mess up our relationships with our local corner stores, we started talking to the folks that had done that kind of work. So that we're in a bizarre kind of place having pulled this all together, because although we're doing the presentation on outreach, we actually haven't done any yet. This is just the presentation in terms of all of the research that we did, the conversations that we had, the lessons that we learned from other people who had already advanced that far in their work with corner stores. And so I want to spend just a second acknowledging the folks that we worked with on that. First of all, a lot of our initial research on this happened even before the Community Food Access Program was created. We did research on the corner store programs in Oakland, California through Saba Grocers Initiative. If you're looking for interesting ways to support folks, especially immigrant communities, communities of color, low-income communities, and the different ways that people have sort of addressed these food access needs in different communities experiencing food apartheid. Saba Grocers Initiative is an incredible model. I think it's in many ways where we want to be maybe 10 or 20 years from now. And then also the Philadelphia Healthy Corner Store Initiative. Very, very similar actually to what we have now with the Community Food Access Program, where they were doing outreach with small food retailers and providing support, different kinds of resources and funds, services to really strengthen those stores and improve the access to healthy, nutritional food in communities that struggle with access. So those were two places that we looked out of state. But then in terms of in-state, we wanted to thank Caitlin Matthews of Food Justice Northwest Aurora, who really turned us on to the Community Food Access Program during the legislative session. Jennifer Gadish from Rocky Mountain Welcome Center, Lauren Ames of Good Food Collective, who helped us really bring in a rural perspective that's super helpful for this. We spoke with lots and lots of different municipal agencies and local agencies. So our Economic Development Department of the City of Westminster, who has been absolutely instrumental in supporting our food justice campaign here, as well as the Adams County Community and Economic Development Department. Erica Way, also, who is on this call, and the folks in the North Metro Small Business Development Center. So really wanted to acknowledge all the support that we got in terms of pulling all of this information together. All of those folks were really important. Our food justice campaign began in August of 2021, right after we lost our last supermarket. We lost it in July. And we immediately started reaching out to community members. Our community members actually started this campaign and then came to Growing Home and said, we want your support. And so we have sort of created this larger campaign, really trying to address those food access issues that we're experiencing, the lack of food sovereignty that we have in our neighborhood. And really closely tied to these issues are the lack of transit that we have, the lack of affordable housing. And so these issues are very, very deeply intertwined with us. So why small food retailers? All of us know it's the reason why we're here, and it's the reason why this grant exists, right? I want to just take a second to remind everyone, we sort of look at this as a kind of living document because we hadn't started the outreach itself. We had only completed the research to get us prepared to do outreach. And so as you're conducting outreach and you're learning lessons from good or bad, right, or neutral from your interactions with store owners, really want to encourage you to document those, write them down somewhere, talk to Mickey, talk to your contractors, because we want to be able to continue to update this guide, right in the margins of this guide. When you have additional lessons that we really want to be able to update this when we have more contextual information. If there are some resources that are out there, but they're not really working for people, they're not really accessible, we want to know that. We want to be able to adjust what we do, how we help our stores and support them based on what's really going on the ground. So I'm going to turn us now to part 1. So we've got a table of contents page here. Hopefully that is helpful for you to navigate this. Really, this guide is structured kind of chronologically. So really, it goes from, I'll back up just the contents for a moment. So it really goes to what do you need to be aware of? What do you need to be prepared for? What are all the things that you need to be really comfortable, fluent in, really before you step inside that store or have that initial conversation with your store owner? So what's really all of the steps that you should take ahead of time in order to make sure that you come in prepared and ready to go. Then from there, we move into the outreach itself. So what are those conversations like? How do I sort of introduce and credential myself? What do I want the conversation to look like? And then what do I do with that? So we're going to talk today about a lot of the really common issues that come up for these small food retailers. And one of the most important pieces is, what do we actually do with all of that information? What we heard a lot of the time was that the most pressing issues that are impacting store owners is not actually how to get more apples into their store, how to have more healthy food offerings. There are more urgent and pressing issues, but we want to make sure that our stores are taking advantage of community food access funds and able to use them in a way that is going to really support them in the long run, especially in neighborhoods like ours where there are no supermarkets. If our corner stores go under, we don't have anywhere else to get food. And a lot of people don't have the mobility to get out of these neighborhoods. So it is really, really important that those stores are sustainable, even sometimes to the extent that may go beyond the scope of the community food access program. So important to understand that kind of broader perspective as well when we go into these interactions. So after the interaction itself, then the guide really talks about, what do I do afterwards? What are the things that I need to make sure to take care of? How can I be sure that I'm really solidifying the relationship that I started with the store owner? And then finally, afterwards, we have a resource guide. So this was really, like I said, this goes back to Growing Home's Food Justice campaign, initially embarking on this work, really because we wanted to be able to just do better resource navigation, kind of wrap around resource navigation for the stores in our area. So we spoke with our county, our city, and we spoke with local nonprofits and other non-governmental agencies that provide support to these small food retailers in our area. And it's something that other communities can easily do in your own areas as well. So we not only talk about the resources that are available if you happen to be doing outreach in our area, but also how to find out who are those similar people, organizations, programs in my neck of the woods as well. And then we have a little appendix here. It's just a quick and easy worksheet that you can use if you're not in South Westminster and you're preparing to do this outreach and you want to speak with maybe your town economic development department, or you want to speak with your local branch of the Small Business Development Center. What do I need to ask them? What else should I be looking for in those conversations? What questions do I have? And so we created a little worksheet so that you can just kind of print that off and use that as you're going through and talking to folks that are providing these resources. But we'll get there in just a minute. Well, more than a few minutes. It'll be at the end. Okay, so preparing for outreach. I want to preface this by saying that I really, really encourage you to read this guide. I'm not going to go through every single paragraph today. We don't have the time for it, and we wrote the guide for a reason. This is written hopefully in a way that's really, really accessible to you. If you have questions, I'm going to put my contact information into the chat at the end so that you can reach out. I also really encourage you to talk to, if you're a subcontractor, talk to your lead contractors on this. A lot of those folks have really, really fantastic insight around this and are sometimes already really steeped in local food systems and have a lot of knowledge. So definitely use your resources and the people around you if you have follow-up questions as well, though I am also here. Just know that I haven't done outreach yet. So it's like, kind of, with an asterisk, right? So just to go through and highlight some really important pieces that I want to pull out. So common characteristics of small food retailers. Most small food retailers are going to be traditional businesses, meaning that they're for-profit. Grants, like the Community Food Access Grant Program that we've been talking about, are not typically open to for-profit businesses. Most grants are only open to governmental or nonprofits. And so because of that, a lot of your small food retailers may not be familiar with the grant, what it is. Later on in the guide, we're actually going to go a little bit deeper into what grants are, how they're different from sort of typical loans, and also what are the kind of common components that you can see and that you could expect, especially since a lot of the resources that we refer to throughout the guide are other grant programs that are actually accessible to these small food retailers. So grant is a form of financial assistance that never has to be paid back. And that is what, in many ways, separates it from a loan. Loans have to be paid back. A tax credit, and this is relevant because there is a tax credit available for these small food retailers, is a form of financial assistance issued as a deduction or a refund against taxes owed by a business after they file their taxes. So it's money they will either get back in a check or that will be added to whatever refund they may be eligible for. Other common characteristics to understand. Small food retailers are often owned and operated by immigrants, by people of color, working class folks, and other historically marginalized and disenfranchised groups, right? It is normal and not weird or bizarre for small food retailers to have some hesitancy around working with the government, government agents, government programs. We just went through an invoicing presentation, which, let's be honest, was like pretty complicated, right? So like for very good reason, there is hesitation out there, right? One of the really key pieces that we heard from everybody that we spoke with is that we're not looking for sort of a transactional kind of outreach. We're not going to just like drop a flyer somewhere. The intention really should be to build relationships to help build up your local food systems, right? So in this spirit of building relationships with your store owners, and we can think holistically too, like obviously we want to make sure that our communities are able to take advantage of the community food access grant funds, right? But from a bigger perspective, if every member of our local food system is connected and interconnected, right, we can help strengthen our local food system. Maybe we don't have enough of a customer base in one single corner store to put it in order to that big distributor that we want, who might not come for just the little order minimum that we have. But if we maybe build a consortium of all of the local stores who might be able to go together and source together, well, then you might have more opportunity there, right? So we're thinking holistically about how these relationships might be useful for our local food sovereignty, not only for this community food access grant program, but also for that as well. And because this is a program that's administered through the state, it's important to remember that your store owners might express some hesitation around that. That's normal, right? This isn't something that you should be surprised by. And a lot of people won't have that hesitation, and that's great. We invite that as well. But we want to make sure that those store owners still feel acknowledged and heard and respected, right? We're not trying to say that there isn't, that there hasn't been struggles in the past, or that government programs are like easy and accessible for everyone. We want to make those accessible, right? And these are, certainly the community food access program is one of these kinds of programs that is deliberately created to try and undo some of the systemic injustice that a lot of our store owners have experienced. And so that's something, that might be important to emphasize as you're having these interactions, if you're hearing those kinds of hesitations. Okay, so moving on to page 6, common challenges. And I want to put a big asterisk here. Lauren Ames from Good Food Collective, shout out, really, really opened our eyes to the very distinct kinds of challenges that arise in rural communities. So growing home is not in a rural community. We don't have that experience. So I want to be very candid about sort of like the fact that this was a little bit of a gap for us. And so I want also, this is another area where if you're working in a rural area, definitely document the lessons that you're learning so that in future iterations of this guide, we have a lot more rich detail to help support rural communities doing this outreach as well. Okay, so really, really common issues that come up. Cash flow. So this is literally about store owners having enough money and being able to make enough money in their business to be able to turn a profit to meet their expenses. Some of the store owners that we heard from are literally not even able to make rent every month. Like they struggle to make rent every month on the sort of building that they use for their business. This is something that for us was a big sticking point, because when we reached out to our economic development departments, different agencies that help support these stores, the common thread was that they don't help with general operating expenses. They cannot help pay the salaries. They can't help pay rent. And so I want to flag this as something to sort of be aware of, and also raise some awareness around the fact that like this, may be one of those issues that might come up for you that doesn't have a clear-cut solution. So other big challenges that often gets raised, safety and security issues. Sometimes there's theft, sometimes there's vandalism. We've heard about store owners complaining that people are dealing illicit drugs in their parking lots. There may not be enough lighting, right? And this is a really common concern, especially among those stores that are in those more low-income communities where you may see more crime as a result of the fact that folks are experiencing crisis. So there are some ways, ways to navigate these kinds of questions or issues that arise that may be within the power of the store owner to impact. So for example, what do we have control over? We can install lighting. We can sometimes change locks, update alarm codes, add additional surveillance. For those stores, for example, that may have had break-ins or they might have had robberies, it's likely that they have already filed police reports. Sometimes victim assistance units within those police departments or in the local district attorney's office that is prosecuting those cases, they have a victim assistance unit, and they can often provide funds to help offset the costs in these specific kind of circumstances. So if there was a robbery, for example, and the store owner wants to put in more cameras, a lot of times the victim assistance unit is able to provide the funding for them to be able to install those additional cameras. So think about the sort of resources that are already kind of somewhat within reach. And then additionally, a lot of local economic development departments are interested in making sure that these stores remain sustainable and are able to help and support these specific kinds of costs. So it's definitely something to reach out to your municipality, your county about, because they may be able to support with money. Sourcing issues. This is another big one that comes up. How do we find products? How do we make sure that we have fresh foods? How do we make sure that they're affordable? So small food retailers are small, which means that they're often purchasing at much, much lower quantities than like your average Walmart market or your King Supers that is purchasing massive amounts of goods. When you're not purchasing massive amounts of goods, what that ends up meaning is that you have higher costs. So that distributor is going to charge less if you're buying 200,000 apples as opposed to if you're just buying 200 apples. So each unit itself costs more. And a lot of times in order to offset that, that small food retailer has to sort of pass that additional cost along to their consumers, meaning that they're actually charging more for the same products than what you would have to pay if you were going to a Safeway, for example. That can often disincentivize people from purchasing from these stores. So it's important to understand that that is a sort of consistent issue that arises. Additionally, in rural areas, and I'm going to shout out Lauren again for raising this for us, a lot of distributors just don't even go to rural areas. So there's not necessarily even a way to get those fresh foods there. Obviously, if you have local farmers there, that's ideal, right? But you may still run into the same issue where you're not buying as much in bulk, and so you end up purchasing them almost at retail or at retail price as well. Some of those big distributors also have order minimums that are like well beyond what that store would ordinarily spend. And so they can't get the distributors to come out there, or they may not be able to get them out there as frequently as they would need. So I want to sort of preview when we get to this section that kind of talks about accessing Community Food Access Program. Most of that really just refers back to the materials that CDA has already put together about this program. However, a lot of the technical assistance providers, like Good Food Collective, for example, already has really good established relationships with the farmers in the area, with, in some areas, food hubs that are able to help you with those sourcing issues. And so your best resources may actually already be within the group of contractors that you're working with or subcontractors. So important to remember also, those are good people to talk to as well. Other common issues, understanding financial and tax structures. These are notoriously challenging. And there's no kind of like free H&R block for businesses. That's for individuals who are low income, right? So important to recognize that there are often some challenges and some questions that arise for store owners in this. There are some resources about this at the end of the guide. Other issues that arise: licensing, permitting, zoning issues with your local jurisdiction. Sometimes you might need a permit that might come from the state. Sometimes that permit comes from the municipality. Sometimes that permit comes from the county. In different places, it'll come from different jurisdictions. How do I know? This can be really, really complicated and tricky to navigate. In these situations, it's really good to get to know your local economic development department staff, because those are not going to be the people that review the permit application, but they will help you move through that process. Because they want that business to be successful. So even though technically they're not part of that like permitting department, really encourage the relationship there with the economic development departments. If you have one in your municipality, if your municipality is big enough to have one, because they will often sort of be an advocate for your small food retailers in those questions. Same with zoning, same with licensing questions as well. Marketing. I'm not going to go super deeply into marketing. We need to market well in order to get a big enough customer base to stay open, right? So one of the really big categories where there's lots and lots of resources at the end of this guide is actually in marketing. There are several different agencies that provide support on that. We'll get to that when we get to the end. Tenant issues. So a lot of these small food retailers do not own the buildings that they are housed in. They rent them. Sometimes the landlord that owns the building wants to sell the building and isn't necessarily concerned about whether the store can stay there. Sometimes there's a dispute about who's responsible for repairs. If there's an issue, maybe the plumbing goes out. Sometimes there may be a situation where the landlord is selling the property and the small food retailer wants to purchase the property, but might not have enough capital to do so. This is another situation where your local departments of economic development can be very helpful, again, because they have a vested interest in the economic sustainability of your area. So really, really good resources, make relationships with those people. These are generally folks who want to work with community. In Westminster, I can speak to our folks in Westminster. They are among the easiest people to work with. They are so enthusiastic and so supportive, and they really help us navigate sort of challenging city policies, processes, budgeting questions, because they care, because they want us to be successful. Lack of consistent electricity due to power outages, another common one that comes up in rural areas. So a lot of times power outages in Westminster here, we're going to have that power outage probably fixed within a matter of an hour or less, because there's a lot of people that work for our utility provider here who are able to make those quickly. The same is not always true in rural communities though. And when the power goes out, cash registers may be inoperable. You might not even be able to open your till. You are not going to be able to use your EBT card processors for anyone that's accepting SNAP or WIC or double up food bucks. Your refrigerators and freezers are probably going to go out. Inventory may spoil, right? And so having just a few hours without electricity can really be crippling to these stores. And it may be something that you very well may hear about when you speak with your small food retailers about the issues that are impacting them. Some of our folks in rural areas are looking at even using CFA funds to be able to purchase backup generators, right? So that if the power goes out for a few hours, they don't lose their entire inventory that's refrigerated, for example, or the ability to check people out, right? So definitely an important and big issue that you should expect to come up, especially if you're in a rural area. Other big ones for rural areas that we learned about: lack of access to broadband or internet connection. Not everywhere is it easy to get a really consistent. I mean, many of you that are in rural areas right now know that it's a struggle even to get on Zoom calls consistently and be able to keep your camera on because of the lack of bandwidth, right? So understanding where these stores are coming from, they may be really heavily reliant on that internet connection to be able to accept credit card payments, to be able to accept SNAP, WIC, double up food bucks, right? Anything that requires an EBT card. And to accept SNAP, stores are required to use a type of POS system that requires consistent internet access. So this has that sort of like initial impact that when the internet goes out or you don't have any internet access at all, there's sort of that initial impact. But then when you think about sort of the secondary impacts as well, a lot of stores may want to be able to access certain kinds of business supports or resources or services or programs that are out there, some of which are cataloged at the end of this guide. And those programs are only open to stores that accept SNAP. Well, if you don't have consistent internet and you can't accept SNAP, then you also can't access any of those programs. So broadband and internet access is a really big equity issue when we think about the different ways that these stores are impacted and the ways that they're sort of struggling. Broadband is not a category of resources that we have cataloged in this, in the resource guide at the end of this. But I bring this up also because The state of Colorado, our legislature recently created a program that sort of really focuses on this question of broadband access and internet access. And so there's actually, I have a link right here that talks about that program. And this is another area where your local elected officials may be able to support and be able to leverage their access and their power through accessing federal resources and state resources to bring internet accessibility to your area. So if you're one of these people that's impacted by broadband issues, definitely consider speaking with your local elected officials about that. And then finally, lack of access to a consistent workforce, especially in the rural areas. Sometimes there's just not enough population density to staff these stores. And also the kinds of sort of job site or job search platforms that a lot of us use in the metro area are not heavily favored in some rural cultures. For example, the Indeed and Colorado Nonprofit Association Jobs Board, Workforce Center, jobs databases, social media, may be a lot less utilized in rural areas as opposed to more informal methods of communication. For example, a local radio station, or even just word of mouth. So it's important to understand and respect the cultural differences that there may be in a rural community. So what do we do with all of these challenges, right? We heard about all of these challenges. Then what's the next step? So presumably you're probably not in South Westminster. Unless you're part of Hallie's team out here working in Jeffco and little touch of it in Adams County in the North Metro area, then you're probably not going to be utilizing all of the resources that we have at the very end. And I want to say a lot of the resources that we do have listed are statewide. They're through the state of Colorado, different governmental agencies, and some of them are also nonprofits that will extend beyond our specific geographic area as well. So don't feel like you can't use the resource guide at the end. But in terms of those local resources, local organizations, your municipal departments, that kind of thing, how do we talk to them? How do we sort of like get the same kind of resources that we have that's available in this guide for folks that are in the Westminster area? So here's what we did, right? You want to remember, right? We're trying to build deep relationships with these store owners. So you want to make sure that you come into those prepared and that you can help talk to them. Some of them may have already had experiences trying to get a grant fund through their local economic development department, right? So it's important to understand that and also be able to say, oh, that program, I know that program. It didn't go well. Oh, tell me more about that, right? As opposed to just being really kind of ignorant or just unaware about all of that. It can really, really help in terms of that trust building towards the relationship that you're trying to build. So best way to get information, because there's a lot of resources that are out there that are directed at small businesses. And we're talking about small businesses, but sometimes the resources that are available for small businesses don't really mean every kind of small business. Sometimes they're more specific than that. So you do want to talk with your local folks about, okay, what do you have available, not just for small businesses, but that are specifically going to be accessible to these small food retailers. And we're talking about corner stores, we're talking about the bodegas. Are these actually intended for them? Because some of them are and some of them aren't, right? So you do want to make sure to get a good sense of that. The bulleted list that you see here is the kind of criteria or the questions that you might want to go through when you're talking to that agency staff, trying to get a better feel for those programs. And then also, who should we be talking to, right? So I've been talking a lot about your local economic development departments. These people are really, really essential resources locally. You may have them at a municipal level. You may also have them at a county level. Talk to both of them. They do similar but meaningfully distinct things from a county to a city level. So make sure that you're talking to both of them. Your local small business development center. So in the back of the guide, in the resource guide, we have our North Metro Small Business Development Center. Small business development centers are the local branches of the federal small business administrations. The federal small business administration runs through a federal government, and their responsibility is to say, all the small businesses across the country. How can we support you? How can we make sure that you're able to succeed? And so throughout the country, there are different branches. And so you can go to the Small Business Administration website, sba.gov. It's this link right here that I'm hovering over. If you can see my cursor, the last link on this page, that'll take you to a page where you can then go and say, okay, this is my zip code or this is my area. And it'll say, okay, this is your local small business development center. Ours is called North Metro, but in your area, it may be called something different. Definitely get to know those folks. These people have so many resources that they are able to provide and help navigate to. And importantly, also, your local small business development center staff are often very well versed in the other resources that are around. So you may have different nonprofit agencies that provide support to small businesses like small food retailers. They may have relationships with your local chambers of commerce. And so these are really great people to talk to, not only so that you can get a better handle on what they can offer for your small businesses in your area, but also who else should I be talking to? What are the other people that I want to make sure that I have this conversation with? So those small nonprofits in the metro area, for example, any of you may have heard of El Centro Humanitario. They provide fantastic resources for small businesses and people that are trying to kind of sort of fledgling entrepreneurs trying to get their businesses off the ground. You may have local chambers of commerce, and there may be other organizations as well, governmental and non-governmental alike, that are able to support in that. So those are also good folks to get a sense of what's out there, right? And then finally, use the resource guide at the end of this document. You can use it as kind of a key. What criteria should I be looking for? That kind of thing. So moving right along. I want to pause just for a second. Are there questions before we jump into grants?
I'm not seeing any in the chat, but this is an amazing presentation, Whitney. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, feel free to put them into the chat. I can't promise that I'll see them while I'm sharing screen, but I will lean on Mickey for that.
I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. Or you can also unmute yourself as well if you're on the phone or something. So I have a little bit of a blurb here about the Community Food Access Grant Program. You're not going to find a lot in this outreach guide itself about the program, really because CDA put together the definitive guide. We didn't want to just sort of rewrite all of that unnecessarily. So what I have here is a link to the website that all of you at this point are probably fairly well familiar with. It is the website for this entire program, all of the information. It really warehouses a ton of useful information. Have that handy with you. And then the second link that you see on this page is the actual Community Food Access Program Grant Guidelines guidebook. So that has everything that you need to know in terms of eligibility, how do I define low income, low access? What does the application process look like? What are my eligible uses for my funds? All of that information is at these links. Definitely suggest that you have both of these handy when you're going to do your outreach. The one sort of piece that isn't really in there, and which we want to make sure to pull out for our store owners, because like we were talking about earlier, grants are not usually available for these small businesses. It's important for us to have at least some low-level baseline information about them so that we can help explain for our store owners to the extent that they may not be familiar with what a grant program even is to begin with, right? So a grant doesn't need to be paid back. And there's kind of some components that are really, really common. Those of you that are from the nonprofit sector already, you may have heard of this, right? I don't want to sort of like beat a dead horse on this because a lot of us, we have to do this day in and day out. It's super, super common. But this provides some information that might be helpful to you if your store owner has questions about the fact that this is a grant program, or what is that? What is it? What's different? What are the components? So grants usually require an application. There's typically a request for proposals or a request for applications that goes out. And then if you are doing work that looks like it overlaps with what they're looking to fund, then you apply, right? The application process might include an interview. It might include a site visit, right? And then once it's clear that that funder wants to potentially give you the grant, then you go into a contracting process. You actually put pen to paper in terms of, okay, this is what you are going to do with these grant funds. This is what we are going to provide and how we're going to do that. This is the expectation in terms of what information that we need from you during the life of the grant, that kind of thing. Grant periods. Most grants are awarded for a specific period of time. Sometimes it's 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, whatever it is. And you have that period of time to spend whatever the money was that was specified during the contracting period. So importantly, if you don't spend all of that money in that time period, you don't get it, right? So this is something to understand. If you have store owners that might be just like me, big old procrastinators, right? They may not spend those funds quickly enough to be able to utilize them before the grant period is up. So if you're working with someone who is, like many of us, a procrastinator, make sure that they understand when their grant period is up, what their reporting requirements are, because all of those, the timing pieces are going to be really, really critical. There isn't often grace periods. Grants typically, when the deadline is up, that's it. There's no going back. There's no extension. So it's something to really be aware of, because unlike going to school and having an essay due on December 12th, but your professor can maybe be convinced to accept it until the 16th, this is not that scenario, right? These deadlines are firm. Reimbursement and upfront. So most grants certainly that come through from different state agencies are going to be on a reimbursement basis. That means that the store has to actually pay for their costs and then produce proof that they incurred that cost, as you all heard in the previous presentation about invoicing, right? You have to prove that you had that cost in order to be able to then be reimbursed for it, as opposed to a kind of grant that offers those funds upfront. There are those grants out there. They're definitely less common, but they're something that are coming up more and more with a sort of greater focus on equity. A lot of stores or organizations don't have the capital to be able to front load those costs and then just wait for a check later. They need that check in order to be able to do the work in the first place. So if you're working with a store that may be really, really struggling to meet their basic expenses, the question of whether or not a grant fund is going to be an upfront grant fund or a reimbursement basis is going to be a really critical question to be able to answer for them, because they may not be able to afford to do the reimbursement kinds of grants. And then finally, reporting, also super common. Reporting typically is like, okay, so you are under contract to do this specific thing with these grant funds. The report typically says, okay, did you do it? What did you do? Show us what you did, right? That's kind of the idea behind it. So sometimes grant reporting means you have to fill out a worksheet. Sometimes they want to come and do a site visit and see, we have a community garden and we built a new shed. So they want to come and see the shed, for example. Some can be very elaborate. Some are very, very simple. They may just want an email being like, thanks, we spent all of your money and we spent it on the thing that you wanted. Other times they want a really kind of like itemized list of every single thing that it was, and maybe a narrative explanation of how that then impacted and strengthened the store or the work or the program that they're doing. These reporting requirements are things that are fleshed out in the scope of work, which is in the contract, right? So basically what you're responsible for. It's not only spending that money on the thing that we said, but also communicating with us about it. So those are the typical components of a grant. And importantly, these, especially the reporting components, the application components, these can be really intimidating, right? Even for those of us that have been in this field for a long time, can be really intimidated by grants. So technical assistance, so critical. A lot of us are technical assistance providers. Some of us are not. These technical assistance providers can really, really, really support in that application process, in the reporting process. and really all throughout. So make sure that you know how to help your store get that technical assistance if you are not the technical assistance provider. If you're only doing outreach, make sure you have that information easily accessible. And you can find that information on the same website that has literally everything that you would need about the Community Food Access Program. It's all in one place, which makes it really easy. And thank you to CDA for centralizing that for us. Okay, so I'm on page 15 now. I'm going to go a little bit faster with my pace. So preparing to speak with your store owners. Remember, right? We're trying to build relationships with our store owners. In a rural area, if you're not from that community, it might be helpful. Find someone from that community to take with you for that first experience. One of the things that Lauren shared from Good Food Collective is that sometimes a store owner might not be as comfortable talking with someone that they see as an outsider who they've never met before in what's otherwise a really, really tight-knit community where everybody knows each other and has a history with each other and trusts one another, right? So if you've got any relationships with folks that are in that community, it may be helpful for you to just bring a partner along for that first one, someone that's from that community that can help provide a little bit of that sort of social greasing of the wheels, so to speak. Second, a lot of these stores are owner operated, meaning that the same person that owns the store works there. They may work there every single day. They may be working 7 days a week, especially if they're family owned. It may be them and their spouse, maybe them and a child, mom, their adult son or daughter, right? And so important to remember that sometimes your store owners are not going to be able to necessarily step away from the work in order to be able to have these conversations with you. So number one thing, be flexible. Your store owner is going to be able to multitask. We ask you to multitask if that's what they want, right? If they don't have the ability to step away, they may say, you know what, can we have this conversation while I'm checking these people out or while I'm doing inventory? Try to the extent that is possible to be flexible and accommodate them for what they need. What we don't want is for them to lose money because they have to close the store in order for you to have this conversation with them, right? So other sort of considerations for accessibility. Some different store owners are going to have different accessibility needs, right? So you won't always know going into it, but after your first interaction, you should know quite a bit more about what their specific needs may be, if there's any, right? So for example, if you have a screen reader, or I'm sorry, if you have a store owner that has visual impairments, they may be using a screen reader when they use technology. Not every document, including the PDF that we're looking at right now, is compatible with a screen reader. They may need this document in a Word version, for example. Understand, right? There's a lot of information on the internet about screen readers. If you've never used a screen reader before, there's some good, helpful resources on the internet to help you understand what might be easier for folks that use screen readers in terms of compatibility and formats that you may want to use. Language accessibility. This is a big one. You want to be really careful to be able to meet your store owner where they are in terms of their language accessibility. You may not speak the same language as them, or you may have someone who is available that you could work with who does speak that same language, right? You really want to try and do what you can to be prepared before you go into that first interaction. If you've got someone who doesn't speak a lick of English, try and be prepared and figure out, okay, do I need an interpreter with me? Can I call a language line, for example, which is a hotline that you can call to get an interpreter over the phone, right? And think about that in terms of the written materials that you may have with them. If you want to leave a flyer with them, make sure that it's in a language that they can read as well. In the metro area, we have a few really fantastic organizations that provide language services. Some of them are here with us today. I don't shout any of them out specifically by name in this book because they're for profit, and that's great. We want to support those businesses, and I didn't want to sort of highlight certain businesses and not others for fairness reasons. But a lot of the time, your contractor, whoever you're working with, your technical assistance provider may be able to help you find whoever the language resource providers are in your area if you're not already familiar. And then just be flexible as it relates to kind of other accessibility questions. There may be sort of physical accessibility questions. There may be intellectual accessibility questions. Just kind of try and roll with the punches when it comes to that. so that you're able to sort of meet your store owner where they are. We don't want people to feel weird about needing accommodations. So timing. Plan your visits during a time when you expect that store to be a little bit less busy. For example, if they have a big coffee business in the morning, don't visit them in the morning. Find a time when they're not having their morning rush or whenever it is for them, so that you can really have a little bit of like good focus time with your store owner. Additionally, try and avoid going right before closing time. Even though there's likely going to be a lot fewer customers there, that's often the time when those store owners may be doing their side work, taking inventory, trying to just get ready to close things out for the evening. And you don't want them to have to stay late just to talk to you. So be flexible in terms of timing as well. And then think also about the total time that it may take. So if you're, especially if you're in a rural location, it may take longer to get to the stores. You may have prep time to account for. So we had one technical assistance provider shared that one visit recently took 6 hours because it was 2 hours to get to the store, an hour of prep time before they got there, an hour and a half to get to the store, an hour of prep time, 2 hours with the store owner, and then another hour and a half to get back. So that's a lot of time. So plan out your day kind of in advance so that you're ready and can really take the time that you need with that store owner once you're there. Technology. Not every store owner is going to be tech savvy. A lot of us aren't even, right? Many store owners may prefer handwriting their applications. A lot of the opportunities, resources, programs, services we have available are accessible electronically, but maybe not practically accessible for folks that don't have as much digital literacy and aren't as comfortable utilizing technology. If a program offers for example, a workshop or a video through Zoom, don't assume that your person knows Zoom, that they know how to access it, that they feel comfortable. So default to asking to make sure that they need help, make sure that they understand that you're there as a resource to support them. A lot of the resources that are available statewide are available over electronic means. So important to think about accessibility for your specific store owner. Is that really something that they can access, and how can you support them in accessing it? And then finally, before you go, think about your goals, right? We can end up getting really off topic with these conversations, especially if you've got a chatty store owner. Those of us who are chatty know that we can get off topic very easily. But you really want to focus your interactions with them. So think about what goals that you have going into it. There's sort of a list here, this bulleted list you can use. Come up with whatever the goal is. And your goal isn't going to be the same from one interaction to the next. That's going to develop over time. It may be different for different stores. But just try and have, something in terms of what am I trying to accomplish? And that also then gives you a good way of understanding, okay, now I'm done with this because we accomplished the thing too, right? So helpful supplies. Again, here's a bulleted list. I'm not going to read the bulleted list to you. You can come back to the guide and review it. But I do want to obviously shout out that Small Food Business Recovery and Resilience Grant Guidelines. That's the Community Food Access Grant Guide that's on the CDA website. And then also remember, if you're going to be filling out an application with that store owner, consider whether it might be helpful for you to bring some kind of technology, a laptop or tablet or something for you that might be useful. I'm also going to shout out face masks. It is the fall. People are getting sick again. Lots of folks never stop wearing face masks. Meet your store owner where they are. If they feel more comfortable in a mask, you come into the store and they're already wearing a mask. It doesn't matter what your perspective is on vaccinations or masks. We're not going to get into that. Show some respect by also wearing a mask. You want to match their behavior. It's going to make them feel more comfortable. Okay, so there's another long section here about tips for active listening, interpreting social cues, and for cultural competence. This is another one we don't have the time to go into super in-depth together today. There's a ton of content here. One of the members of our team is a psychologist, and she put a lot of work into this. She knows what she's talking about. I did not write this section. So definitely use this, especially if this might be your first time doing outreach. And active listening is one of these skills that really enables us to build real, genuine, trust-filled relationships. And this is a skill to develop. It doesn't mean that if you've never done active listening that you can't do this outreach, but it is something that you can practice on the daily. In your home or with the people in your neighborhood, you can practice active listening, and I really encourage you to do so. You will see the difference in how people react to you, how they respond, and the level of trust that they feel in your relationship with them. So definitely, if this isn't something that you're already familiar with, do a deep dive. And there's a ton of wonderful resources on the internet about active listening as well. There's also sections here about speaking, about body language, about eye contact, distance and personal space, about silence. Silence is something that you can utilize in a conversation in a way that sort of feels surprising and weird, because silence means that you're not actually talking. But silence can be a way to get people to share more. And so I really encourage you, there's lots of good information in here as well about utilizing silence, sometimes asking questions, and then when you get a short answer, and then utilizing silence, because naturally humans fill silence. So people that might not share very much to begin with, and they might give you one-word answers, if you give them some silence, they will fill that silence with the information you are hoping that they might share. Another section here about social cues indicating the end of a conversation. If you are a person that tends to hover, this is for you, friend. I am guilty of this too, so don't call anybody out, but this is just some sort of flags, nonverbal cues that you can look out for. And this is going to be important. Remember, we're here to build trust and to build relationships with folks. And so we do want to make sure not to overstay our welcome, especially since a lot of the time we're going to physically be in their space, right? So they can't leave, but we can. And then some just general tips for interpreting social cues and for cultural competence as well. So big areas to definitely get into. Don't assume that you have earned the store owner's trust just because you're showing up with your intention to help. They don't know your intentions, right? So it can take a few encounters for them to get comfortable with you. Don't be offended by that. That's okay. Conducting outreach. So remember, the first person that you talk to in the store may not be the owner. The person that is not the owner is probably not going to be the person who's going to be able to access these resources for their business. So you want to make sure that you're speaking with your owner. Be respectful and kind and graceful with whoever you see in that store, right? Because all of that is going to reflect on you, right? So when I'm introducing myself, I want to make sure that I'm identifying who I am, credentialing myself, explaining what organization or association I may be with, even if it's just an informal community association of community members that have come together. I want to give them a very brief explanation of why I'm there, right? This is important because we don't want it to feel like we're rambling or that there's no purpose to this interaction. And then we want to make sure that we get a foot in the door to be able to speak with them further. So there's a little blurb here as a kind of a series of examples, different ways that you can talk about it in terms of how you might introduce yourself and kind of do this sort of conversation opener, right? In a place like South Westminster, I might say something, like, hello, my name is Whitney. I'm with Growing Home. I'm working to make healthy foods more accessible to the folks in our neighborhood. As you probably know, we don't have a supermarket anymore. And so for our community members, it's really important that our corner stores are robust and sustainable and are able to be around in the long term. You guys are so important for our local food systems. Do you have a moment to talk with me about being a store owner in this neighborhood, for example, right? And then that's a good way that you can kind of kick that conversation off, right? A few important things about this. If you choose to tell a personal story, keep it brief, right? We talked about this with active listening, but you really want to be the person that is opening the conversation, but really letting that person speak. Let them fill the silence. We are not there to fill the silence. If they ask how long this is going to take, it's really up to you. I would say cap it at 30 minutes in terms of what you tell them, because the truth is that no one wants to spend longer than that, even if they ultimately decide, maybe we should take more time together. And that would be great, right? Remember to also have them introduce themselves. We want to hear from them too. This is really important because we're there as much to get to know them as they are to get to know the programs that we're going to be talking with them about. And then conversation prompts that we have, right? So the next few pages has a bunch of different questions that you can utilize in these conversations. Some of them aren't going to be necessary because a lot of people might just jump right into, here's all the things that I'm worried about. But if you're speaking with someone that might need a little bit more teasing out in terms of getting them to talk, you can use the conversation prompts in the next questions. These are not intended as an interview script. And importantly, please don't use this guide that way. You're not going to be able to build successful, trusting relationships with people if you're reading to them from this guide. So try and just take a few gems of what you would like and focus on that so that you can remember it, right? Additionally, remember that some of the questions that you may ask them may make them feel very vulnerable, right? What are the challenges that you're experiencing? That can be a really, really tough question. In our culture in the United States, we don't talk about our money problems. This is not a thing that's normal for folks. So remember that the person that you're speaking with is often going to feel maybe vulnerable and a little uncomfortable with these questions. And so it's that much more important to make sure that you're actively listening, that you're reflecting back what you're hearing and understanding and validating the struggles that they experience, right? Be gracious with them. And then also don't overcommit or overpromise. This is really important, right? To making sure that we're able to build that relationship based on trust, right? You can commit to trying your best. You can commit to being consistent with them. And it can be helpful to say, this is what I commit to, but you don't want to overpromise in terms of what specific grants they're going to be able to get, what specific help they're going to be able to get. Because at the end of the day, you can only commit to what's within your power to impact, right? And then before leaving that conversation, make sure you are very clear on what your next steps are, whether and when you're going to meet again, any expectations for follow-up, their preferred method of communication. That's going to help you build that sense of trust with them. So I'm going to skip over the next few. This is just sort of the list of questions that you can use, which you can come back to. They're separated by general inquiries, which are really kind of like icebreakers, inquiries about challenges that they may be experiencing as store owners, and then inquiries that are a little bit more focused on the Community Food Access Program and resource navigation. So following up, this is where our relationship gets tested, really and truly, right? If we go into our first interaction with them and we say, okay, we're going to reach out to Tammy at the Economic Development Department, and then we never do it, you have officially ended that relationship with that store owner. So you want to be making sure that you are following through on those commitments. Be consistent with them. Be timely in responding to phone calls or emails, or if they visit you. If you set a day and a time for a follow-up visit, be on time. Don't be late to that, okay? You can even potentially confirm your meeting with them maybe the night before or a couple of days before to make sure that they still work with them, that still works with you. Now, some store owners, they don't respond to messages. They don't look at their phone. They don't have an email account, right? So some of this is not going to work for everybody. Use what's appropriate for you. If they say that they prefer text message, don't start emailing them. Use a text message, right? You want to honor their requests and then promptly follow through with whatever commitments that you make with them. In the days afterwards, and especially if you have referred them to a resource, or maybe you referred them to a technical assistance provider for their community food access application, check in with them afterwards. Maybe in 3 or 4 days later, check in if you can, right? Now, for the store owner that never picks up their phone, doesn't respond to email, and is 2 hours away from you, this might not be possible. But if it is possible, give them a call or use their preferred method of communication. Hey, were you able to get in touch with that technical assistance provider? If I can help you, if I can support you, let me know. And then afterwards, right? Like you can do a little bit of a postmortem with them. So let's say that you referred them to your economic development department. They were going to speak with Tammy about maybe getting some funding to be able to put some lighting in their parking lot. Now, you know that they have that conversation on October 12th. So maybe on the 14th or the 15th, I'm going to call that store owner, or I'm going to use their preferred method of communication to check in with them and say, hey, how did that go? Did that work out? If it didn't work out, why not? What happened? Is there any additional support that you can provide? Or potentially, was there something wrong? Is the resource that we referred them to actually not able to support in that? And that way you can then update whatever information that you have so that you're not referring people to programs that may actually not be tailored for them specifically. Okay, moving on. So this resource guide, I'm really just going to talk to you at this point, and I know that we've got only 4 minutes left, but we will finish in time, about how this is organized. So big picture, kind of like different categories of topics are in this very exciting rainbow area up here. So you see the different topics, many of which were the common challenges that we heard about at the beginning of the presentation. And then you're going to find the resources listed. It goes first by resources that are state of Colorado, meaning that they go through some kind of Colorado state agency. After that is Adams County. After that is City of Westminster. And then there's all other resources, which some of which are restricted to folks that are in the metro area, but many of them are not. Many of them are not. So if you are not in our area, you can still use this resource guide as it relates to the state of Colorado agencies, as well as the other resources, many of which have a reach beyond just our little local area around here. Many of these programs offer both educational and direct support, meaning they may teach you how to get financial assistance and also provide financial assistance. Some of them only teach you how to get financial assistance, but they don't have any money for you. And some of them only have money and they don't have educational component. So those are also separated in terms of the kind of underline. So you'll see that in the program specifically. And then we've got the different stars, asterisk, plus sign to help you understand where these are accessible. So you can look through, we'll just take this first one as an example. We've got the areas of support, general business support, marketing, financial assistance through Colorado Office of Economic and Development and International Trade, OEDIT. And then this small business accelerated growth course is a double underlined because it has both an educational component and it provides that direct support as well. And then you have for every single one of these resources, a description of the program itself, any eligibility restrictions, and then how to get in touch or apply to get into that program. The broadband resources that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation are not in this resource guide, although you can easily find the Colorado Broadband program on Google, as well as through the link that's earlier. And then I'm going to just skip to page 45 if you're following along in your guide. Page 45 is where the other resources start. Okay, come on. PDF, Adobe, you can do it, friend. We're almost there. We're almost there. So, sorry, y'all. Page 45. This is where other resources start. So I have the information here about the North Metro Small Business Development Center, but remember, there's a different Small Business Development Center for every different region in Colorado. They have multiple programs, so they're listed for each program separately. And then we've got in here Community Enterprise Development Services. This is a non-governmental organization, therefore it's in other resources, not in the state of Colorado, but they are accessible throughout the state and they have multiple programs. You'll see these here. And then at the very, very end, there's a few more. There's Mi Casa Resource Center with the programs, Good Food Collective, their food business resource directory. And then finally, at the very end, we have that Appendix A. So if you're talking to your local agencies about what different programs and services they offer, and you're trying to figure out, oh, what are all the questions, what is all the information that I need to gather from them, you can use this worksheet. Okay, and we're out of time, and I finished.
That was incredible, Whitney. Both that you covered, well, one, that you made this an amazing resource, and two, that you were able to get us all the way through it in this short period of time. So huge thanks to Whitney and everybody, both on this call and who's not on this call, who contributed to that. And just know that all of you will be contributing to this as we meet together monthly throughout this year of your contract. So thanks to everyone. I'm going to just plug that I plan to send one more scheduling. I think I'm going to do a Google form so that we can determine what the best time to meet on a regular basis monthly is going to be. So yeah, huge thanks to everybody for coming today. Whitney, for your presentation. And don't be a stranger if you got some questions for me, Department of Ag, and yeah, the Community Food Access Program. So it's 2:01. Thanks, everybody. See you later.
Thank you.